So good morning, Mr. Lee Baumgartner, and thank you so much, sir, for granting us the opportunity for the interview here today in Siem Reap province. And sir, you are the what we call aquatic ecologist at the Charles Sturt University in Australia, sir. And today you are, participating in a conference on the fish passage, especially in the lower Mekong region. It is the second time here in 2025, and the first time was in 2016 in Vientiane, Laos. Sir, I want to focus on something a little bit, let's say, focused. So what we are having in front of us here is what we call the fish passage, but this is of course a model. So can you explain to us a bit, sir, like what do you mean by a fish passage? Or in Khmer, we call the fish ladder, a fish elevator, something like that. Sir.
Yes, we call them fishways, we call them fish ladders, fish steps, all of these many different terms for this. Effectively, what a fish ladder does is you can see here, this fish ladder has been constructed at a dam.
So this is a dam, sir?
This is a dam. This is a very common type of dam. The dam is constructed to provide water security in the dry season. It can be constructed to divert water into an irrigation system.
Yes, sir.
It could be constructed for town supply. Now, whenever we build a dam on a river, it stops the fish from migrating. And this is the critical problem that we are trying to solve.
So the water will flow from a higher elevation here down to the lower elevation. But the dam keeps the water from reversing. Is that is the case, sir?
Correct. And sometimes the height of the dam can be 6-10 meters high. And the problem is, many of these fish, actually over 95% of fish in the Mekong, have to migrate upstream. They migrate upstream for the spawning grounds, they migrate upstream to the feeding grounds, and when we build a dam, it blocks that access. And we see many areas where a dam is constructed, the fish decline. It always happens, not just in Cambodia, not just in the Mekong, it's around the world. The migratory fish need to get to their spawning grounds. And we've seen many times in the Mekong, in Australia, in North America, in Europe, where if the dam is built, fish become extinct from upstream. The fishermen cannot catch the fish, the ecology is damaged, and it disrupts the entire system. And so it's a very common fit. And so what we are doing and what this conference is about is what kind of solutions do we have to overcome the impacts of dams?
Yes, sir, but what, what is the reason, that allow the fish to go back upstream? I mean, of course, to reproduce.
Yes.
But is there any other, major reasons?
Usually it's to reproduce is one. The number one, and a lot of fish in the Mekong do this, we call them feeding migrations. So they are migrating to the areas where they feed. For instance, there is some fish, the Lao name is Parsoi, they're a really small barb, and in the Cone Falls region, on the border of Cambodia and Laos, all of the fish are swimming along the rocks, eating the algae. That's the feeding migration. They go from the spawning ground to the feeding grounds, and if they don't get to the feeding grounds, then they will starve. And so they're going for that. The other reason fish migrate is we call for nursery habitat. So a baby fish, if a baby fish lives in the main river, it might get eaten by a bigger fish. Now, baby fish will go to what we call a nursery habitat, which is a wetland, and the wetland is protection. There's vegetation, there's places that the baby fish can hide from predators. Now they go there, they grow into a big fish, and then they come back to the river.
So the dam also disturb, of course, the wetland habitation for smaller fish. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we see that everywhere around the world.
Yes,
so,
sir.
Brazil, Africa, Europe, North America, Australia, and Asia. Everywhere.
Yes, sir. But judging from the design of, let's say, the fish passage or the fish ladder, I was informed that there are two ways that the fish can get upstream. So one is of course, what we call the literal ladder, water ladder, and also the other one, which is a bit more of a shortcut. So is there any difference between the two?
Look, there is worldwide. There are over 40, I think there are now 44 different fish ladder designs.
44 different
44
fish.
different ones.
Oh, okay.
And the choice of which one to use really depends on the fish. And we always say, if you want to get a good outcome for the fish, you have to think like a fish.
So how do you think like a fish?
So if we can see the fish here, these fish are really small fish. And one thing about really small fish is if the water is too fast, the small fish cannot swim against it. And so we have to understand how strong the fish can swim in order to design a fish ladder that has the water that they can swim against. Now you think if you are a runner, if you are an athlete, you are running, if it's flat, it's easy. If it's steep, it's hard. It's the same for a fish. If the fish ladder is too steep, the water is too fast,
They cannot
go
swim against the current.
yeah, they cannot go against the current. So in this particular fish ladder, you can see it is not so steep, the water is not so fast, and the fish can swim against it. And so the very first thing we will do when we design a fish ladder is we try to understand what fish want to benefit from this. That is the first step. The second step, we will talk to the fishermen here and we say, what fish are you catching? How big are the fish? What time of year do the fish come? Are they rainy season fish? Are they dry season fish? And once we understand all of the different fish here, and some of the sites in the Mekong, we can have 200 species, 200 different types of fish.
So how do you design, a system that cater to every species as much as possible? So?
We find the weakest fish and we design for them. And we say, if we can provide a fish ladder that works for the smallest fish, it will work for the big fish. So that's how we do that. We break it down into a simple step of the most vulnerable fish that is the weakest swimmer is the one we design for.
Yes,
and so once we understand that, then we talk to the engineers and the engineers then help us to come up with a really good design. This design here is what we call a vertical slot fish ladder.
Slot. Yes, sir.
This here is the slot. We say vertical slot because it's up and down. And the good aspect of this design, this is probably the most successful design around the world.
We build this everywhere. It is simple.
It is simple, but also this vertical slot, you can see in the dry season when the water level is low, it is still working. Now, if we bring the water up for the rainy season and the water level goes up,
it is still working.
It's still working. And so the one thing that is why this is really good for the Mekong is it works in the dry season and the rainy season. So it can provide fish passage. When we say fish passage, that is the movement of fish from downstream to upstream all year.
Yes, sir.
And so vertical slot fishways are very good for that. But at some sites, Sling Dam, where we will see on Friday, we have a field trip to Sling Dam. We only need for the fish to pass in the rainy season because in the dry season,
there's no water.
There's no water. So we can design a fish ladder only to work in the rainy season.
So that also influences the way how the passage is built. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And it also influences the cost because if you only have to build a fish ladder that works in the rainy season, it's much cheaper. And so the investors like that a lot more. So once we understand the fish and we understand the design, the third thing we do is we understand if it needs to work in the rainy season and the dry season. And that is all, again, we have to think like a fish. What are the fish doing in the rainy season and what are the fish doing in the dry season? Thinking like a fish is critical.
Yes, sir, but this system, does it require, human intervention on the daily basis or, you build it and then it runs automatically? That's
the good thing about the vertical slot design is no human intervention is needed. The only time you may need a human intervention is if the exit becomes blocked. So some sticks or maybe water hyacinths
then you need
or
to move
something.
it out. Yeah.
Then we just clear it out.
Yes, sir.
And so in those circumstances, what we would do is we would work with the local community. The local community will take ownership of the fish ladder and then we say it's community management. We hand it to the village chief. The village chief then works with the district fisheries people to manage and they will make sure that it works when it needs to work. And so part of our process is we work with the design team to come up with a good fish ladder design, then we work with the community for the long-term benefits.
Yes, sir. But just now you mentioned that, think like a fish. So normally, instinctively or maybe, by how they learn, throughout their life in the water, do you think fish knows how to navigate through this? Like, is it by their, instinctive nature?
Most of the fish that are migrating upstream follow the water current. So when the water is flowing downstream,
yes, sir,
that stimulates the fish to go upstream, and they
so
follow the water current.
They don't care if it's a passage or if it's a dam.
That's
they
right.
all follow the current.
So if the fish ladder was not here, all of the fish would go to this point. because that's where the most flow is, and they will sit there trying to go upstream. We call this is really critical for us, we call this the upstream limit of migration. At any dam, we can go to there and we say, okay, where will the fish go? And we look at this and we go right here, because there is flow, the water is deep, the fish will try to migrate. So when we build the fish ladder, so back to your question, how do the fish know where to go?
Yes, sir.
We tell them. We tell them because we provide some flow here,
Yeah, that's how.
and we provide some flow here, and the fish will all go to this corner and swim up. So thinking like a fish, we absolutely use the principles of fish knowledge and what the fish needs into the design of a fish ladder. So we can, by changing the flows with good engineering, we can move the fish to where we want them to go.
Yes, sir, but let's say generally and also statistically, like how effective is it? Like, I mean, do all fish that have migrated downstream will all find their way back to upstream, or some of them, can be left behind by chances? Sir?
It depends on the species. Now, in the Mekong, there's some really interesting species. There's the Kremfi catfish, which is very famous. The Kremfi catfish lives in the ocean at the Mekong Delta.
Yeah.
In the
Vietnam,
spawning season, it swims through Vietnam, it swims through Cambodia, it swims into Laos, and then it spawns. So the Kremfi catfish must do that every year. Then the baby catfish go from Laos to Cambodia to Vietnam to the ocean. Now, if that's blocked, the fish will become extinct. Many species of Mekong eels, they will live all of their adult life in the freshwater. Now, when the eel wants to spawn, it goes downstream all the way from Laos to Cambodia to Vietnam. Then it swims to Japan. And it spawns in the ocean near Japan. And then the baby eels come back from Japan to Laos. It's amazing. It's almost 3,000 kilometers. So there's two types of fish there that have very big migrations. Now then there's these types of fish that if you build a dam, they may still breed upstream and it could be fine, and they still breed downstream. And so again, when you have 177 species at a site, then we have to understand each one. Now, if these ones do not need to migrate,
Yes, sir.
we don't consider them in the fishway design. We focus on the ones that need to. And we call them, the technical term is obligate migrators. Is
Obligate
that
migrate.
they are obligated to migrate in order to survive. And we target those species first.
Yes, sir. So again, sir, generally, like how long does it take, from the planning phase to the building phase and also to the operation phase of, let's say, a medium-sized passage in Mekong River, sir?
We really like to involve the community in the design. And so the very first step for us is to go to the village, to talk to the villagers, to meet with them and understand. Now that process can take a few months, but what we have found is that if we start the consultation in the rainy season and we design the fish ladder, and the design of the fish ladder can take a few weeks, if we have a good team, we can build a whole fishway in a dry season, ready to go the next year.
Easier for construction.
Easier for construction in the dry season.
Yes,
Always construct in the dry season. If you construct in the rainy season, it's a little bit difficult.
Yes, sir.
So we can have a fish ladder designed and constructed in less than 1 year. And since the Fish Tech project commenced, so our Fish Tech project commenced in 2022, we've already constructed 12 fish ladders. So that one is, But we have a really good design team. We understand the process and we understand the fish very well now.
Yes, sir. So my last question. So the sliding dam that we are going to visit for us, the journalists today. So can you give us a sneak peek of how that dams work, so that we can have like a preview of what will happen?
So the Slang Dam, we know in the rainy season, it used to stop the fish from going upstream. And all of the fishermen at Slang would be fishing here to catch all of the fish that were trying to migrate. The fishermen at that site, many of them lived upstream of the dam, but had to travel to the dam to catch fish after the dam was built because the fish had become extinct upstream. So it changed the behaviour of the fishermen. Now for Sling Dam is very unique because there's two fish ladders at Sling.
Oh, okay.
We have a vertical slot fishway and we have a different design called a cone fishway. The cone fishway works very similar, but instead of having the vertical slot, it has a series of steps and the fish swim over the step. The reason we had 2 fish ladders at this site was really for education. It's a site where we can take ministers, it's a site where we can take council members, it's a site where we can take scientists and engineers and compare 2 fishway designs. So it's an education site. Normally we would only build 1 fish ladder at a site, but Sleng, for education purposes, there
So
is
it's a
2.
dual purpose.
A dual purpose.
Passage.
It will help the fish and it will help people learn about fish ladders. Yeah. So we are very proud of what we have achieved in the Mekong. We started this work in 2006. The very first demonstration site was in Laos. It started in 2008.
Yes, sir.
And since then, we have built almost 80 fish ladders across the Mekong region.
80 fish ladders,
yeah,
big and small, sir.
Big and small, in collaboration with hydropower companies, with ADB, World Bank, MORAM, in Laos, Department of Irrigation, so many different agencies. All the way from at Xayaburi in Lao PDR. There's a big fish ladder we are working on. The fish ladder is the biggest in Southeast Asia. The budget, $300 million US, big budget. All the way down to a fish ladder at Kampong Spur, which we are building, is $50,000. So we go small and big.
So the prices can vary dramatically, sir.
Depending on the height of the structure, depending on how many fish, depending on the flow and the water levels, so many different factors.
So each passage is a piece of its kind.
Yeah, everyone is unique. Everyone is unique. Everyone needs a design team to work, and it's a really rewarding work. And especially when we see the local people who have not caught fish for many years start to catch fish again, then that is happy for us.